with a few housekeeping items at the top here. Again, my name is David Larson. I am the Deputy General Counsel for the Illinois Workers' Compensation Commission. This is the second scheduled demo and question and answer session that we have for you in the lead up to the go live of CompFile Release 3 later this month. It'll be occurring on April 21st. We did a demo and question and answer session last Thursday, and a recording of that session is now available on our CompFile YouTube channel. You can go ahead and access that from the CompFile implementation webpage. I say this every time. Please go ahead and check out the webpage. It's at iwcc.il.gov/compfile. There you can find all the updated information that we have for Release 3, along with instructional written materials and videos, and then the schedule for our demo and question and answer sessions over the next few weeks. Before we begin, I'll mention that we are also scheduled to participate in the WICLA Brown Bag CLE event this Wednesday. Connor and I will be giving a demo of some different topics at that event, and that's again this Wednesday, April 7th at 12 p.m. So our plan today is to cover the 4 items that we have listed here for the agenda. That is applications, and Connor and I did a demonstration of applications back in February, so we'll be covering that material again. We also have some changes to the electronic settlement process that we're going to be rolling out for Release 3 here based on some of the feedback that we received from our users after electronic settlements went live last July. We also have an updated case lookup. So we're going to discuss the distinction between the current case lookup that you use on the IWCC's website and the new one that'll be available to you in CompFile. And then lastly, we'll cover some pro se information, particularly around pro se settlement contracts, which will now be filed in CompFile when we go live with Release 3. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Connor Gallagher. He's going to be giving the demonstration just like he did last week. We also have Fran Davis, Beatrice Atwater, Matt Bryant, and myself will be answering your questions using the question and answer function. So please feel free to fire away. And Connor, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see you all attending again. By my count, there's over 300 attendees, so really glad for another big turnout. I'll just say at the top that we anticipate spending the majority of the time today showing the changes to the settlement process, just because, as Dave indicated, we did demo applications to WICLA back in February, and it's actually a very similar process to the settlement web form that you guys are all currently used to. So, but I will start by showing that application process again. Okay. So do the other panelists, can you see my screen that says Travis Thornbury?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so as I mentioned last week, this is the landing page, the new CompFile landing page for attorneys. I'm going to click on this applications button. And now I'm in the applications area. And you'll see I have a big blue button, initiate application, right? We're following a very consistent trend of having the initiate button in blue on the top right of pages. The first page of the application web form asks a lot of very similar questions to the settlement web form. You'll notice, right, we have very similar logic where if it's a fatal case, I get the date of death field to fill in. So this should all feel very familiar to you, right? We have a very similar drop down of city and county, and this is to drive our assignment process. So CompFile is actually assigning the arbitrator once the application is filed, and you'll actually get a case number and an arbitrator assigned within seconds of submitting the application, and you'll see that here today. So on this next page is probably the newest feature of the application web form specifically. You'll notice that we have a table of employees/petitioners, and then further down on this page, we have a table of employers/respondents. And that's because we allow you to list multiple petitioners and multiple respondents on an application. And to do that, I click this blue button, Add Petitioner, in the top right. When I'm adding petitioners, I get a pop-up dialog box, and it allows me to add their first name, last name, other additional information. So I'll just add myself. And this other additional information, so let's say, for example, it's a fatal case and you have multiple dependents that you're going to list on the app. This could be where you add, this is a dependent or surviving spouse, something like that. That's what this field is for. If I click submit, you'll notice that there's this list first field. And what this means is that when CompFile generates the case name for this case, the left side of the case name is going to be Connor Gallagher, and it'll be Connor Gallagher versus the list first employer respondent that we put in the table below. So if I wanted to add multiple respondents, or excuse me, multiple petitioners, right? So if I add Dave, you'll notice that when I add him, it shows as list first is no, so that even though he is a petitioner on this case, the case caption is still going to show, or the case name is still going to show as Connor Gallagher v. whomever. And I can change that if I want. I go down here and I go list first. Now it changes so that David is the list first petitioner. So the case will read as David Larson versus whomever. And finally, the one important thing to call out here is that if you're going to have the petitioner e-sign the settlement contract, excuse me, the application, they'll be able to e-sign the application similar to how they do settlement contracts. Only the list first petitioner will be able to e-sign. So if you have multiple petitioners listed, only the list first petitioner will be able to e-sign. I'm going to go ahead and keep myself as the list first petitioner. Move on. Very similar concept with adding employer and respondent. You have to add the address information. And the reason being is that IWCC will still be mailing the initial notice with the assigned arbitrator, case number, and status call date to this named employer on the application. Very similarly, if I wanted to, I could add multiple respondents, and I have a similar list first functionality here. So right now, I know just looking at these two tables that this case, once it's submitted, it's going to read as Connor Gallagher versus Respondent Co. Limited. Okay. And everything after that point is very much copy and pasted from the current settlement web form. A lot of very similar controls, drop downs, mandatory fields. This should all look very, very familiar to you if you filed the settlement in CompFile. And as such, I'm just going to quickly go through it, fill it out so we can submit this. The only new question there is that prior application question. Now, the next page of the application web form is where you attach documents, and we follow a very similar format to how you add documents to the settlement web form, where you have this concept of the document set. And we're asking that on the original application that you submit a proof of service and a rep agreement. I'm going to attach those now. And again, these controls, these buttons, these screens that you're seeing should look very similar to the current settlement web form that you're used to. So it's just being, a lot of that foundational stuff that we developed for settlement web form, we're using for the application web form. So this is proof of service.
And Connor, if I can just interject,
Sure.
that proof of service is a requirement because you're indicating to us that you've mailed a copy of this application to the employer named in the application, the employer respondent named in the application. We don't have a record of them in the system. You're submitting this application to the IWCC, and you still have to serve the employer outside of the system. So that's why we're requiring that proof of service attachment. As Connor indicated earlier, the commission will still mail a copy of the notice of case filed to the employer that you've named in the application that provides the case number and the arbitrator assignment. Again, that's something that's happening today.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, that's a great clarification. I want to call out here also on this page, you'll see that there's a checkbox for petition for immediate hearing attached. Today, we have a checkbox on the paper application form where you can attach a 19B pleading to that application and get it docketed right away. Very similar concept here. If I check yes, then I'm going to need to attach a scanned or filled out in Microsoft Word or however, I'll need to upload a 19B pleading. And once this gets submitted, a 19B pleading is going to be put on the first assigned status call of this application. In practice, I think we added this function, but I will say, and we'll touch about this in a later demo, I think it makes more sense to wait until you've submitted the app to submit the 19B filing, because as you'll see later, it's very easy to do. And you'll have the added benefit of knowing the assigned arbitrator and the case number when you go to complete that 19B pleading. So we added it there just in case, because we wanted to keep it consistent with how our current form is used. But in practice, it's probably easier to wait and submit later. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. So this is the final page of the application web form. You'll notice that we have the list first petitioner, who's myself, and you'll notice that we have the same concept of signature type, right? So the attorney here is e-signing, because all attorneys have to e-sign settlements and applications. But as far as the application, you can still use the signature on file approach that we discussed in great detail with the settlement contract, which is you get a paper copy of the application from CompFile, and you can do that by clicking this print button. You print it down or email it to your client and have them sign it outside of CompFile, and then you just keep a copy of that in your personal record for up to a year. But the way in which you add the signature is a little bit different here. Let me show that again. So we're here on this final page of the settlement web form, and the way in which I specify whether this petitioner, who is my client, is e-signing or not. So I click this down arrow and I click update signature. And then I get a pop-up window where I select e-signature on file. I'm going to go ahead and click signature on file for right now. So I add this, and now the signature is applied by the petitioner to this application. Okay. Now, one feature that's nice, that's new, is that, and you'll see this later on with settlements as well, is actually I can actually go in and change this if I need to. So I think the more common scenario is, let's say you were going to have your client e-sign this, and they got an email, and then they come back to you later and say, you know what, this is actually maybe more complicated than I wanted to figure out. Can we go ahead and just sign this on paper? And you would be able to go in as the attorney and change their signature type right before you submit this this application. So I'll leave this as signature on file for right now. And I want to show one more thing before I submit this that's going to require me to come out of the application web form. I'm going to click home. I'll go applications. So it's still in draft, but you'll notice this is the application I was just in. You'll notice that the status is petitioner signed. And so one thing that you'll be able to do, especially if your client is e-signing, you'll have a way to monitor when they've e-signed the settlement contract. And we actually built a view. I click this down arrow next to my draft applications, and it just says petitioner signed applications. And it's only going to show you applications that are in this petitioner signed status. That way you have a way of knowing if they've, completed their step of the signature process, and you're good to go to submit this. So because this was signature on file, obviously the signature is already applied. Oh, and let me show one more thing actually before I go and submit this. We also have the concept of changes needed with applications, and the way in which you get to that is by this drop down arrow on this application view page. So if I click this, you'll see I have changes needed. And what that does is it removes the petitioner's signature, and it allows me to make changes to the body of the settlement contract. Because as you'll see, because the petitioner's signature, I think I said settlement contract there again, I meant application. You'll see that because the petitioner's signature is applied, I can't make any changes. But if I click changes needed, I'll be able to go back into this application and make changes. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Got to apply my signature. Now I can submit. And so as I indicated, you'll get an email. The submitting attorney is going to get an email as soon as this application is submitted, showing the assigned arbitrator, the first status call date, and case number. And you can view all that information in CompFile too. And the way in which you do that, just go to the cases area, and it should appear in my list. And here it is. It has the highest case number. It's assigned to arbitrator Fruth, status call on May 14th. And here's the case number. So that's the application process. I want to show really quickly how you initiate an amended application. So in order to initiate an amended application, you would go to your case list and find the case in which you want to file that amended app. Click the drop down arrow here, and you'll see that initiate amended application is one of the options. If I click this button, I want to call out this page specifically. We have this prompt that says, do you want to pre-populate the amended application? And this is very important. There's some language up here that says that this feature only works if the application was filed originally in CompFile. So if you attended last week's session and we talked all about case claiming, let's say you claim a case and you want to file an amended app in CompFile on it, you're not going to be able to use the pre-populate feature for this amended application, and that's just because of how the data from the mainframe is migrated. But moving forward, once you, with all your cases that you filed an application on in CompFile, you'll be able to use the pre-populate function on those. I can show you an example of what that looks like. So you can see, right, it preserved that this last accident location was in Chicago. If I go to the next page, here's all the information I filled out. So it'll save you some time, right? And I can go in and make a change. And the actual, the thing that CompFile generates that looks like an application document, very similar to how we generate settlement contracts today, CompFile is going to generate application documents. We're going to have the fields that you change in the amended application on the web form. We're actually going to do a strike through, a visible strike through. So on that thing that CompFile generates in the field, what part of the body was affected, you would see right arm crossed out, and then you'd see left arm not crossed out right next to it. Okay, so that's a brief summary of the pre-population process. Go ahead and click save and exit. Any questions, panelists, that are popping up that I need to show something again? Okay, so sounds like we're good. I'll go ahead and move on now to talking about changes with the settlement process.
And I'm sorry, Connor, just to interrupt there. So we just had a question regarding attaching the original application to an amended application. So as Connor indicated, if you filed the application in CompFile, you have the ability to pre-populate the amended application. If your original application was filed on paper, you would be essentially starting, and you would initiate an amended application. You wouldn't be able to pre-populate it, so you'd have to complete all those fields again. And then as an attachment, you should add a copy of the original application that you filed with the commission so that we can see what changes were made. And that's a requirement that's part of our rules today. I mean, if you're filing amended applications with us, you are supposed to attach a copy of the original application that you filed. So you'll continue to do that process in CompFile.
That's a very good point, Dave. Yep. So on that attached documents page on the amended application web form, one of the options is original application, and that is required. Before I go to settlements, I'll show really briefly, this is the email that gets sent to the filing attorney when the application is submitted. You can see it shows you accident date, location, when it was filed, case number, signed arbitrator, hearing location, and first status call. And it's worth noting that if respondent counsel appeared on a case and you filed an amended application as petitioner counsel, respondent counsel would receive a very similar email of that amended application filing.
Connor, can you quickly access a copy of the application that you just filed to show that it receives a case number?
Yes, I can.
To show how that can be accessed.
So this was the case that I had just filed. You can see that here's the case number, here's the signed arbitrator, first status call. So that's just in the cases list. Once you file the application in the apps area, if you come right on over to the cases area, you'll see all that information. And if you're ever unsure, you can just, you'll get that email delivered, right? And you say, oh, this is the case number I need to look for. Go here. You can even type it in if this list was much bigger.
And then to print a copy of that application to be served?
Sure. Absolutely. So I can actually go do that by going into this cases area. I briefly showed this last time, but this is just, this case details page has a bunch of what we call subgrids or little tables that show all the things that were filed in this case. And you can see towards the bottom, here's applications. You print. And there it is. So here's the actual application that CompFile generated for me. And there's that proof of service and rep agreement that I attached. And these will be visible by respondent counsel once they appear as well. This would be how they'd find those documents. Okay, anything else? All right, let's talk about settlements. So the structure of this talking about settlements is going to be to highlight a couple of changes made specifically based on feedback from you all. So I'll start. I have this kind of cheekily named settlement called Delete Me. And this is to show some changes to when you can delete settlement contracts. So you'll notice that this settlement is in the routed for signature status. That's another change, is that this is no longer waiting for signatures, it's routed for signatures. So we just changed the label of that status, right? It's no longer waiting for signatures, it's now routed for signatures. It means the same thing, just slightly different wording. If I go into this settlement contract, right, I am the drafter, and there's no case number because this is a no app settlement, right, which are now going to be able to be submitted in CompFile. If I scroll to the bottom, right, I see that changes needed button that I'm familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and click it. So we still have the same concept of changes needed that you're used to. Both the drafting attorney and any of the receiving attorneys can click changes needed. So now it's going to bring me back to the start of that web form, but I don't need to look at that right yet. So what I want to show, this is going to reload, is this is now in the status of returned by attorney. And as you know today, we don't allow deletion of returned by attorney settlements currently. However, moving forward, as long as a settlement contract has never been submitted to IWCC, which this one has not, right, because it doesn't have a case number, as you'll see, I can delete it. And of course, it's not showing me that, but in reality, you'll be able to delete settlements that have not yet been submitted to IWCC. So that includes settlements that are in draft, right, which is the same as it is today. You can delete a draft settlement if you're the drafter. And if a settlement is in return by attorney status and it was never submitted to IWCC for approval, it can be deleted. And I apologize that I can't show that because I seem to have encountered a bug, but I promise you that's been implemented. Okay. Now I'll go ahead and start a new settlement. You'll see that we asked these same questions that we do today about pro se settlement or case number. And as previously indicated, pro se settlements are now going to be submitted in CompFile, right? And it's an important distinction to make between pro se settlement and no app settlement. Most of the time, they're one and the same. Sometimes a no app settlement doesn't necessarily mean a pro se settlement, right? You could have representation on both sides and they're just submitting a settlement contract without an application previously on file. That's allowed too. All right. So I'm going to actually show how I would file a settlement with a case number. And the reason being is because filing a pro se settlement, oddly enough, is very similar to the current settlement web form that's in use today, where you add petitioner, the represented petitioner, or excuse me, not the representative petitioner, but the non-represented petitioner, using that add petitioner page. All the same stuff about routing for signatures, that's all the same. You'll see that once I select yes for do I have a case number, I get asked if I'm amending previously approved settlement contract, right? The same logic about when you're supposed to check this box applies, right? If there's an approved settlement contract on file in this case, then I would need to submit an amended application before I couldn't submit a non-amended application in that case. I said application, I meant settlement. Pardon me. A lot of switching back and forth between the two. And do you need a commissioner assigned? Again, we asked this question today. If I have a case that's currently in arbitration, but I need it assigned to a commissioner because, let's say, the arbitrator lost jurisdiction, right? I'm settling after a decision was issued and it's been X number of days after the decision was issued. Now the arbitrator's lost jurisdiction. I can click if I need a commissioner assigned. I'll go ahead and click petitioner attorney. I'll start.
Hey, Connor, can I just interrupt on that commissioner assignment question real quick?
Sure.
If one of the commissioners retires or doesn't get reappointed and a new commissioner comes along, you don't answer that question yes. You would not need a new commissioner assigned. You would just stay with whoever inherits that commissioner's situation. That question is limited to when the arbitrator's lost jurisdiction, because as the example Connor mentioned, a decision was issued and it became final, and then there was no commissioner on the case, and so you had an aspect of a settlement that then needed to be routed to a commissioner.
Thanks for that clarification, Matt. So you'll see that on this page, right, this should be very familiar to you currently, where you search for a WC number to associate the settlement to a case. This is a case that I previously filed, and I filed the application in CompFile. So when you see that this question about pre-populating the settlement contract, same rules apply, where this feature only works if the original application was filed in CompFile. Because it was, in this instance, I'm going to click yes. And you'll see that most of the settlement web form after this point is very similar to what you're used to. You'll see that up here, right? I no longer select setting and I no longer select assigned arbitrator because it was inherited from the case, that case that I linked to, the Isaiah injured worker case, right? You still need to add some information, right? You'll notice that we're still asking this question because we don't get it necessarily on the application. Oops. You can see here's all that information from the application that I previously filed, not in this demo, but previously filed, and it's pre-populating on the settlement web form. Excuse me. And at this point, once you get to the TTD benefits page, this is where the pre-population mostly ends. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly because this is all the same as it is today. No changes here. Oops, missed one. Similar thing here. I'm petitioner counsel, so I'm going to add all this stuff. I'm going to add the deductions. Moving right along. All right, and we have, again, these where you add documents. These are still the same, right? Representation agreement is required if it's a no app settlement, which this is. No, excuse me, this is not. So I do not need to add one of those, but I still need to attach a final medical report. Okay. You can see I can't add any attorneys on this page because these are being inherited from the case, right? I'm the petitioner attorney, and this is the respondent attorney that appeared. So I can't add any attorneys on this settlement. They're just inherited from the case. If somebody else needed to be on this list, what you would do is just stop what you're doing with the settlement and have that person file an appearance on the case itself. If this was a no app settlement or a pro se, you'd be able to add additional attorneys. So similar question about having like a TPA representative e-sign the settlement contract. Still allow for that. I'm going to skip that for now. What I really want to focus on is adding a petitioner here. So I'm going to add an e-signing petitioner. So this was Isaiah, injured worker. So I'm going to have Isaiah e-sign this settlement contract. Here we have attorney comments and body part unchanged. Okay, and here we are at the final page. Now, I indicated before that in the application web form, we had that update signature feature. We've actually brought that over to the settlement web form as well. And what's nice is that I have the ability to change his signature type, Isaiah's signature type, even after I've routed this settlement. And the reason this is important is what this essentially allows you to do is you can route the settlement first to your opponent, have them sign, and then after they've signed, route it to your client, the petitioner, right? So I'm going to state that again because this is something we've heard a lot from the petitioner's bar, and we've implemented this, right? This is a scenario where I am the petitioner attorney of record and I'm drafting the settlement contract. I want to first route this settlement contract to respondent counsel and get their approval before my client is routed this signature or routed this settlement by CompFile. In that scenario, what I can do is I can change their signature type to the petitioner signature type from e-signature to signature on file. I still have to put in a date. Okay, I still have to put in a date, but I can change this date later. Now, once I click route for signatures, what's going to happen is Marcia is going to receive an email, but Isaiah is not. And I'm going to go ahead and show the entirety of this process. So I'm going to switch over. Now I'm showing a screen with where Marcia's logged in. Okay, you can see this is in routed for signature status. Right, all the same controls are there that you're used to. I'll keep that as no for now. Leave that the same. So I'm logged in as Marcia. I'll e-sign. Okay, now that Marcia's signed, I'll tell Travis that, yep, it's all good. I'll go back to Travis here. I'll do the same thing, go back to the end of the settlement web form. Update signature, change to e-signature. I'll put in his email address again. Click update. And now Isaiah is going to receive an email to e-sign a settlement contract that has already been signed by respondent counsel. I'm actually going to go and get that email now. Well, that's not the one I need. Let me pause the screen share while I get that loaded up. Just bear with me while I wait for the email to send, because I want to show another change to the settlement on the petitioner side. Okay, seems to be acting slow here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Thanks for your patience. So if you see my screen is frozen, it's not. I've just paused the screen share while I'm getting this other window loaded up. I finally got the link I needed. What I'm doing behind the scenes here is I'm actually registering as Isaiah. I got that email address, or excuse me, I got that email to my email address, and I'm registering as a new e-signing petitioner. And now I can resume. Okay, so I'm logged in as Isaiah Injured Worker. I only have two buttons, right? If I was going to e-sign an application, here's where I'd go to e-sign. If I was going to e-sign a settlement, here's where I'd go to e-sign. Going to e-sign a settlement. Here it is. One thing that we're running a little short on time, so one other feature that I can't demo, but I will indicate, is that once a settlement contract has been fully approved, you will be able to see all documents that were attached to that settlement contract. I know that's been a sticking point of the current implementation of electronic settlements. That will no longer be the case. You will be where you only see the actual settlement contract that CompFile generates. You'll be able to see everything that was attached when it's in the approved status. One thing I wanted to show here is that we added attestation language to the e-signature page for the petitioner. So they'll see this before they e-sign if they didn't see it or take the time to read it on the actual thing that gets generated by CompFile, the actual settlement contract that gets generated by CompFile. Okay, so those were the main changes that I wanted to cover with the settlement process. I know that's a lot, and I intended it to be the bulk of today's demo, and it was. So yeah, I hope you guys like what we changed.
Hey, Connor, here's a question I'm going to read out to you, okay?
Sure.
So for cases that do not have a defense attorney, so there's only a petitioner attorney with a TPA signing for the respondent, is it possible to get notice when the insurance company claims adjuster e-signs the contract?
No, so there still isn't any notice that when the respondent e-signs, it's responder TPA e-signs, but what you can do, and one thing that we did add, here I need to change my screen here. Oops, that's not the right one. All right, I'm logged in as Marsha, this will work. I go to a settlement. One of the options that we added is view signature status. So you don't have to page through everything. You'll just be able to go within a particular settlement contract to see if a certain party is signed or not. So it's an easier way to check on the status of whether or not somebody's signed. Okay, anything else before I transition to the next topic?
Connor, does the claim information entered on an application, can that auto-populate the settlement?
Yes. If the application was filed in CompFile, you can pre-populate the settlement contract with the information on the from the application.
And then can you edit it even if you pre-populate it?
Yes, you can.
That was another question. Here's one that you might be able just to demonstrate quickly right here. How would you print a draft settlement?
Same feature that we have today. It's one of the drop-down options from your list of all settlements, right? So if this was in draft status, you'd still see the print button. And again, that's already implemented today. And then you might have noticed it while I was going through the settlement web form. On pages where you're asked to add petitioners, you'll see a print button at the bottom of the page, and that does the same thing where it generates a draft settlement contract that you can download and circulate however you want. Okay. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left and 2 topics left, both of which we're hoping we can cover pretty succinctly here. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this idea of case search page. And there's actually going to be 2 case search pages moving forward. And let me bring something up to facilitate what I'm talking about here. So this is something that was emailed a couple of weeks ago, and it's currently on our CompFile implementation page. is important logistics regarding CompFile Release 3. One of the thing that's listed right here at the bottom, the last paragraph on this form, the current IWCC public lookup will stop being updated during the transition. So the last time that this is going to be updated is this coming weekend. The mainframe is going offline on April 9th, and there's an interim period where certain things are going to be delayed, but one thing that's going to happen is that lookup page is not going to be updated after that point. Okay, it's still going to exist, and you can still go to it and look up information about your case, but it's going to be frozen in time as of 4/9. Any activity that was data entered before the end of the day 4/9. So we're going to have a new case search page that's run out of CompFile, and it'll function very similarly. And in fact, it's going to be better in a lot of ways. And I'll demo that for you now. So right now, the only way to get to it easily is I have to sign out. We're hoping that we can add a button when you're logged in to get to it. But you'll see that on the sign in page, right, where I would go to sign in, I have two buttons here. I have one for call sheets, and I have one for new case docket search. I'm going to click new case docket search. And we're probably going to put links to this on different areas of IWCC's website. But this is the primary way to get to it for right now. Very similar disclaimer to what is on there today on the current case search site. So you can see here, I have a couple of fields that I can search on: case number, petitioner, first name or last name, and respondent name. All right, so this should be look very similar to the current case search page that you have today. All right, what I'm going to do, I'll look up that case that I was just working on. All right, so here's Isaiah, injured worker. And in this search results area, I get some information about the case right away. But you'll notice I also have a hyperlink here that I can click on. And if I click on this, my web browser is going to open a page that is essentially the case details page. But the only difference is that for filings that were submitted, right, I can't actually look at the thing that was filed. So if you remember, I demoed a little bit ago that I went to this page when I was logged in as an attorney who is party to this case, and I actually pulled up a list of the filings that were submitted with this application. If I scroll to the top of this page, you'll see that I'm not logged in. I'm not logged in as anybody. CompFile doesn't know who I am, attorney, general public, or otherwise. But what I can do is I can come to this page and I can learn about this case, including who's involved with it, right? Who are the parties? What venue is this in? Is this a red line case, right? A bunch of information that we currently provide on the current case lookup page, but just organized a little differently, including what filings were submitted, right? I can see that Marcia appeared on this case 4/5. I can see that the application was filed if there was an original application that was filed versus an amended application. So this is what the case search page is going to look like moving forward.
Connor, can you? Oh, you're on the searching page right now. There was a question about date of birth searching. I thought that was there. Apparently not. I think what you do is you search by name, and then you can sort by date of birth. You can see the date of birth. Yeah.
Right. You'll notice that I click on date of birth. See these arrows changing. There's only one result here, but this will sort ascending or descending, and I can do that with any of these.
So you can search by date of birth. You can see date of birth results, but you have to have at least some basic name search to accomplish that.
So, and to highlight what I mentioned before about we have the two different case search pages, right? So obviously this case number is brand new because I filed it CompFile. But if you have a case, right, that's currently active today, right, and you look up on Friday, April 9th, and it's you know in a just a regular arbitration status, and it's not it's not settled, doesn't have a decision issued, it's for all intents and purposes it is active. If something happens in CompFile, right, let's say a decision is issued in CompFile on that case after we go live, if you go to that old case lookup page, the one that's currently in use today, you go to that old lookup page, it's still going to show that that case is active. But if you come to this lookup page, it's going to show that the decision was issued and the case is now inactive. And this will be, I mean, it'll be incredibly apparent which one you're looking at. If you're looking at the old one or the new one, there's going to be all kind of language leading up to getting to either of those pages that says, hey, just so you know, you're looking at the legacy case search page, things might not be updated, or hey, you're looking at the CompFile version, the case search page. Okay, any questions on that? So we're just about at time, and that's fine because the final thing I wanted to talk about today is just a very high level overview of what pro ses can and can't do in CompFile, and some of that will dovetail into what we have our filings discussion on Wednesday the 14th. But just to get you an idea going, I prepared a brief one page slide. Okay, so let me go back to this. Okay, so are you guys seeing a slide that says pro se petitioners in CompFile?
Yes.
Thank you. So there's just two, I divided this by settlements and filings, and just some high level information. Feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want. This is just some high level information about pro ses. By no means is it the full picture of what they can and can't do, but it's just enough to ideally head off any questions that people might have in these, while we're still talking early on. And it's also, like I said, to get the gears turning when we go to have our next demo session on Wednesday the 14th. I think the two things that I'll call out here are, we have this note about how pro ses appear on cases. And we're going to have a lot of documentation on the website specifically for pro ses. It's going to be a like its own dedicated sub web page, lots of information. And secondly, I have this big bolded note here at the bottom that says important. The reason I call this out is if you are petitioner counsel and you're appearing on a case, and the case, the petitioner was previously pro se petitioner, CompFile knew of them as a pro se petitioner. The reason why you'd want to contact us is once you appear, they're still going to have the ability to make filings on that case until we do something. And it's something that IWCC can change very easily to make it such that a pro se petitioner who is now represented no longer has filing access. It's just something that we need, somebody to reach out and tell us to flip the switch. And it might be that, I doubt this is the case, but it might be that you don't care about that, right? You might be representing the petitioner and you don't care what they can or can't see or can and can't do in CompFile because, it's at the end of the day, you're going to get in front of an arbitrator about the meaningful things, and the arbitrator is going to say, well, what the heck is this? And you'll say, Your Honor, I apologize. My client submitted this in error. Please go ahead and dismiss it. So again, this is by no means meant to be, a full knowledge base or full representation of all the things about pro ses and CompFile, but this is just to get the gears turning. So this is the last thing on the agenda today. I know we're a little over time, but as we've done with these other demos, we're happy to stay on longer and talk about what we demoed today, answer any other questions. And as Dave did indicate at the top of this call, let's please be mindful to keep the questions on the agenda topics that were covered. I know that we have a lot of questions about notice from the last session that we had, and as I indicated, right, we have a session coming up on the 14th next week that's going to talk all about notice. So for right now, we'll answer any questions about applications, amended applications, changes to settlements, the two different case lookups, and then this information that I have on screen right now.
And Connor, I just want to call out a few important dates here. So you brought up that one-page logistics document that was circulated to attorneys and firms when we announced the go-live date. We will stop accepting pro se settlement contracts this Thursday. So today you're submitting pro se settlement contracts in order for a case assignment to occur, get a case number, get it assigned to an arbitrator. If you're doing that on paper, it has to be in before this Thursday. After that date, you will be required to submit the pro se settlement contract in CompFile beginning April 21st. But again, the assignment, case number, and arbitrator assignment will be occurring almost instantly. So we feel that process will actually be sped up once you can begin submitting these in CompFile. You'll get the arbitrator assignment, and then you can go ahead and reach out to that arbitrator and set up the WebEx hearing, just like you're doing today. We also want to just make it very clear that in order to push the new features for CompFile, we will be taking the system down during that 6-day window between April 15th and April 20th. So again, if you have settlement contracts that need to be submitted in CompFile, please do that here in the next 10 days. We will actually probably bring the system down the night of April 14th at the close of business. So I just want to make that clear. Get your settlement contracts into CompFile now, because there will be a period there where it is down. We got a question about the WebEx hearings for pro ses. Those do not have to be completed by Thursday. And as long as you have the case number and the arbitrator assignment, you can have those scheduled. we had a question, and I'm going to read this one out. For amended apps for legacy cases, the original app will need to be attached. Does that need to be front and back of the app, or will the front suffice? Excuse me. Yes, just the substantive part, where you list the details of the claim on the application. Just make sure that that's being filed with the amended application, so it's easy for our staff here to distinguish what has changed on the amended app. I know the practice today is maybe to highlight the field that you've changed. And for these legacy cases, it might be helpful to just kind of call those things out in whatever you're attaching to the amended app in CompFile. We had another question. Will the respondent's attorney have to instruct petitioner to set up CompFile to e-sign? And this is in the case of pro se settlements. When you add them as an e-signer to the settlement contract, they are sent an invitation to register for CompFile. It's a very simple process. They use their email address and then create a password. And we also have videos on the website that walk non-attorney e-signers through the process of signing a settlement contract. So you can always direct them to the video and have them walk through it.
I have up on screen the actual email that they receive. So if you remember, this is Isaiah. This is the email he got. We actually did change the verbiage a little bit, just because if somebody is a repeat offender and they've already registered for CompFile, they don't need to do it again. So we have a distinction between just going to the website versus clicking this registration link. And we've got, like I said, we're going to have a whole bevy of materials on that CompFile implementation page for pro ses and also for just represented petitioners that need to use the system so that they're they're in the know of what to do. So I think some people are asking questions in the Q&A area specifically to me. If you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and copy those and address them to all panelists.
There was another question. When petitioner's attorney files the application and then receives the email case filed, will a notice be sent to respondent's attorney, be sent out as well? Well, typically for the application, there is no respondent's attorney on the case yet. What will be sent out by the commission is a notice of case filed on paper to the respondent named in the application. That's the same process that occurs today.
And I did briefly indicate that if on amended applications, if respondent counsel has appeared, they will get an email when the amended application is filed.
And just to add to that, once the respondent attorney does appear on the case, as Connor indicated, they start receiving the notices, and they also have access to all the filings made in that case.
There's been a few questions about searching under date of birth in the case search. And I'm a little bit confused by the questions because I'm pretty sure today you have to do a birth inquiry, you have to do a name inquiry first. Are you familiar with that, Dave Larson? I don't think you can just do a search for anyone by a date of birth. You have to do a name search first.
You can search directly just on date of birth.
Okay, thanks.
So that's something that won't be available on 421, but again, I think as we've shown, we get your feedback and we look to improve this system all the time. So that's certainly noted. Thank you.
So here's a question about what happens if a petitioner doesn't have an email account or access to the internet. And I'm guessing the question pertains to either filing an app or filing a settlement contract. And for either of those situations, you can meet with that petitioner and have them sign a physical document, or however you're getting their signatures today. You can still do that, and then you can indicate in CompFile that their signature is on file.
We have a question here. A settlement contract has been sent to the petitioner's attorney for signature, but now needs to be updated. Will we be able to return the draft to the respondent attorney drafter for updates and then resend for signatures? Yes, that's a process that's available to you today using the changes needed button. And when you click the changes needed button, either the drafter or the attorney receiving the copy of the settlement contract, that's going to clear out any signatures and allow the drafter to go in and update the contract as necessary.
Connor, when you were demonstrating this search feature, you logged out first, but I wanted to point out that you may have mentioned this, and I didn't hear you mention it. There will be a direct link to this search page. You don't have to log out to get to this link. You'll be able to get to this link through. You'll be able to bookmark and get to this link directly. You don't have to log out to do it.
That's right, Matt. Yeah, you don't need to be. It's not a prerequisite to log out in order to use this page. You can use this page while logged into CompFile.
So
It's just by way of getting to it. The easiest way for me was to log out because I didn't have it open in another tab.
Right, but someone's asked, can you do both at the same time? And the answer is yes. You can be logged into CompFile and do a search at the same time.
So the questions are starting to slow down. Again, I'll mention some of the topics that we discussed today. We will have written instructions available for you here on our website, I think later this week, especially as it pertains to pro se settlement contracts in CompFile. We have detailed instructions to kind of walk you through that process. There's also already an instructional video on pro se settlements that's available today. So we encourage you to check that out. And we will post links to the recordings of the 2 sessions that we've now completed, the one last Thursday and today. Those will be on our website here shortly as well.
Dave, there's another question about the amended information in the header, where it says amended at the top. And the question was, will it numerate like the first amended or second amended?
It will not specifically enumerate in the header of the printed out version of the application, but you will be able to kind of indicate based on the date filed what is the last most current version of the amended application. Connor showed in the case details page, there'll be a row for each amended application that you file, and you can see the date filed and know that most recent version is the one you should be referencing.
Well, actually, Dave, we do have, it's not exactly an enumeration of like first amended, second amended, but you'll notice that for apps, we have this idea of a document number, and this is something that CompFile generates sequentially. And if you were to file an amended app, right, this is an amended app. So the original submitted app, you'll see was, I have a lot of them. So it was it one of these two? Now I'm getting confused. Okay, so it's Connor Gallagher v. Respondent. So you'll see that it was, here, I'm sorry, let me show it this way. So if I generate this Word document, or excuse me, this PDF that CompFile generated of that original application, it'll show me that document number, that number that starts with A, and it'll be a lower increment than the one on the amended app. So that's one way you can use for your own system if you wanted to just refer to that. Oh, this is a bad template.
Oh, goodness.
Apologies, but this is where that number would appear. I apologize that this is so unsightly, but this would be where that number appears. And when you look at the amended application, it would show up this number right here would show up in that area on the PDF. So apologies that it wasn't ready for prime time, but that is a way that you can track enumerations in CompFile.
I suppose if you had scads of amendments and you're free to include an attachment that could serve as, for example, like a cover letter that could explain, you know, how the prior amendments.
All right, we're about 20 minutes over our allotted time. Questions have stopped here. I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to participate in this demo and question and answer session. Again, we'll sort through the questions that we've received, and we're compiling that into a frequently asked questions list that we will post on our website and make available to you. Just want to remind everyone, again, as I mentioned at the top, Connor and I will be participating in a demo this Wednesday at 12 p.m. for WICLA, and that's a CLE event, and that is scheduled for an hour and a half. So a good opportunity for attorneys to gain some CLE credit. And then we have another demo question and answer session scheduled for next week. So thank you all. And we look forward to this next release and working with everyone to make it a success.
Thanks, David. It's been a pleasure, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.